Now it's 6 o'clock. This is BBC Radio 3, and we come to the final part of our Jazz File series, Downtown Avant-Garde, charting the work of the American composer and saxophonist John Zorn. The programme is presented by Steve Beresford.
Could that have been the sound of a lone saxophonist enjoying the merciless slaying of an evil record company executive? Quite possibly, because after walking away from a major deal with None Such Records in 1992, John Zorn decided to go it alone and start his own label.
The last thing I wanted to do was own a record company. But practically, I think the only way an artist can survive in this society and retain 100% credibility, integrity, and self-respect is to do it yourself, is to be in control and own your own catalog. So I started Tzaddik Records. It couldn't be more different than a major corporation. It's incredibly artist-friendly, and it's based on profit sharing. All the expenses that go into making the record are paid off first, and then we split the profits. Everybody gets the same budget. Every record on Tzaddik was made with $5,000. And this is esoteric music that's not going to sell a lot of copies. But nevertheless, we have records that have sold 35,000 copies on our label. And others that have only sold less than 1,000. But the balance is in a good place. The concept is that a composer's work should always be in print, should always be available. The thing about major corporations is if it doesn't sell, it drops out of print, and that's the end of it. And you may never get it. And if I didn't have this label, half of this shit that's lying here on the floor wouldn't be in print. You wouldn't see it. Half of it, more than half of it. Probably all of it. You know what I mean?
Night Hotel 2, a track from one of the many releases of Zorn's film music which may never have seen the light of day without Tzaddik Records. With a composer series and an archival series, as well as series for radical Jewish culture, Japanese new music and the lunatic fringe, the label was designed by Zorn to encompass the full range of his musical interests. It also quickly became a focal point for new talent.
I heard John Zorn before I came here, and I kind of liked it.
Israeli saxophonist Danny Zamir.
And then I came here, and then just played a gig, and I had a little CD that I made in Israel. I introduced myself, I gave it to him, and once in a while I'll give him a call if I had I wanted to invite him to my gigs.
Now my side of the Danny Zamir story. The guy hounded me. He was hounding me. It was really, it was fine. It was fine because he's got a lot of energy, really young cat. And he gave me a CD like a lot of people do after a gig, came by, and I listened to it, and the first one he gave me was okay.
When Zamir made a second demo recording, this time with his New York band, he made sure Zorn was the first person to hear it.
It was really great. He was always a good player, always had a great tone. For a young cat, it's unbelievable. But something kind of coalesced in the time that he had been in New York, and things had kind of jumped a level. So I called him and I said, well, there's a lot of potential here. Let's try to mine it. Since I don't want to release this as is, let's go to a better studio, let's pick some of the tunes, eliminate some other ones, maybe get some guest musicians in, and try to create something that's, really going to make an impact.
Since he got a lot of crap from a lot of people, he's very sensitive about respecting your music and knowing that it's your music. And he gave us a lot of advice and a lot of things. He told me, yeah, this is the way I want it to be. But he would always say, but it's your music, so you decide.
John Zorn making a guest appearance with Danny Zamir and Sattler. As well as giving new talent an outlet on his label, Zorn also reintroduced some free jazz pioneers to the recording studio. In the 1960s, legendary percussionist Milford Graves played with the New York Art Quartet and saxophonist Albert Ayler.
All of my experiences with John has been on a very deep, soulful level. You know, it's not about academics or business. Even when we talk about recording this, I don't look at it as a business thing. You know, it's more like a type of a brotherhood and a real spiritual thing. I can relate a lot of what John's image is to the kind of image I had maybe in the 60s. That a lot of people don't know how to deal with you. It's just that kind of energy. And like I'm saying, he has that kind of energy. I mean, John knows what he wants to do, and he moves straight ahead and forward, you know. And if you're lagging behind, it's like, I think John's the type of guy say, hey, wake up, don't go to sleep on me. I've seen him talk to, you know, producers or promoters or whatever you want to call it. And man, John, the way this guy talks, man, he's not afraid, you know what I mean? So anybody like that is important.
At the same time as performing and producing for his new label, Zorn found the time to guest on albums by other musicians, including guitarist James Blood Armour and organist John Patton.
It's exciting to see different working methods. I can tell you, John Patton's working methods are very much like a family. I went into his house in New Jersey to rehearse, and it was like his nephews were there, his cousins were there, you know, friends in the neighborhood were there. They were cooking while we were rehearsing. John Patton doesn't give you a chart and say, play it. He says, okay, Zorn, you know, you say oo-bop-da-bam, and then Jimmy's going to go ba-ba-bee, and you got to kind of like, you know what I mean? It's a very oral tradition, and it's very exciting to be part of that and to learn from them. Blood Ulmer was a little more organized, but still coming from that same kind of tradition. And I remember one specific story on the record I did with Blood, maybe it was a year or two ago. There was this one long melody, and he wanted me to play the melody of the tune. I was playing everything that was written on the page exactly as it was written on the page. But it just did not sound like Blood Ulmer's music, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And he said to me, okay, Zorn, just play the melody by yourself. Everybody else stop. And I just played the melody by myself, just saxophone. He said, okay, now let's do it again. Do it just like that. And then we started it up. And all of a sudden, it all made sense. It was like he didn't want the concept of something that was really linked in tight with the rhythm section. He wanted something kind of floating. Now, he said, you know, just make it float or, you know, blah, blah, blah. And he said what he could say, but it didn't really work until he actually showed me. And things like that are really incredible learning experiences, working one-on-one with, you know, people who are from a different school, a different world. It was exciting. And also, they called me for a gig. And what am I going to say? You get called for a gig, you don't always say no, you know? Sometimes you want to say yes.
Devotion by James Blood Ulmer's Music Revelation Ensemble. John Zorn's appetite for improvisation has been one of the few constants in his musical life. Even as a composer, his main interest until the 1990s had been in harnessing improvisation with pieces such as Cobra. The mid-90s, however, saw a shift in his focus as a writer.
I don't know if I can really give you a very tangible reason why I moved into writing completely notated classical music. My mother was really sick for years. She went through cancer and then finally died. And those years I wanted to stay more in New York, so, you know, composing made a lot more sense to stay here. And we can also say maybe I'm going full circle and I've come back to where I started.
Carney, commissioned and performed by leading new music piano player Stephen Drury. A close collaborator and friend of Zorn's for over a decade, Drury believes that the key to understanding his classical compositions lies in the mid-80s game pieces, especially Cobra.
The whole idea of Cobra is this idea of juxtaposition and unpredictability and order being brought out of chaos. And that's what all of his stuff that I've played seems to be about. Finding the meaning in the chaos and finding the sense of timing between the bits. Each little flash has to be desperate and urgent, and if there's a two-bar quote from a Mahler symphony, it's got to sound like you're suddenly in the middle of that Mahler climax. You know, I don't think he quotes Mahler, but for example, you know, you have to be right in there. It can't be just play the notes at forte or fortissimo and go on. It's not that smooth arc. It's a quantum mechanics approach where suddenly things will just flash into being totally charged for for no reason and then disappeared just as suddenly. That's the meaning of his written out stuff, as far as I'm concerned.
An excerpt from Aporia's Requiem for Piano and Orchestra, issued on Sardic in 1998, and almost bringing our brief glimpse into the musical world of John Zorn to an end. It's a world, as you've heard, that contains, in no particular order and often at the same time, free improvisation, string quartets, duck calls, film soundtracks, orchestral works, jazz, radical Jewish music, hardcore punk, and much, much more. The volume and diversity of his output is, at times, bewildering, but the quality and integrity of John Zorn's music is undeniable.
I don't really have these wild dreams that I want to do this or want to do that. I'm very pragmatic. I work with the people that are available to me. I will continue to do improv concerts. I will continue to make music with the Masada Band. I will make file card pieces. Everything kind of continues concurrently, and each piece is done, completed, and move on to another one, instead of regurgitating the same thing over and over and over in different contexts, which seems to be what most people are comfortable with. I meant every single note I ever made, and I played it and created it with as much passion and sincerity as I could.
Fils des Étoiles by John Zorn, closing this week's Jazz File. The series was presented by Steve Beresford and produced by Steve Shepherd. Downtown Avant Garde, the music of John Zorn, was a Something Else production for BBC Radio 3.